Hello, I'm Chris and welcome back to another episode of Rock Roundtable. In today's episode, we will be discussing Slash from Guns N' Roses, Eddie Van Halen, and Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath. Along the way, we will have a couple of points where we go off topic, mostly due to the debate about which single from Van Halen was the best, but I urge you to stick with us throughout the whole video as we have a lot to say. If you haven't watched part 1 of the best guitarists of all time yet, do consider watching that as well. I have a link in the corner right now and also in the description below. Also be sure to like this video, leave a comment with your thoughts, and be sure to subscribe and hit the bell button below for more great music content.
I want to talk about the one and only Slash Guns N' Roses fame. Basically, he's like, when I think of Guns N' Roses, I know we think about, think of Axl Rose. But I think that what makes most Guns N' Roses songs work is basically the guitar work, and Slash is the one who makes it all work. And I would argue that Guns N' Roses was only good when he was there. So.
Yeah. Well, Slash certainly, I think, has contributed to my favorite moments from Guns N' Roses' songs, most notably the second guitar solo on, as well as the guitar work on the ending part of November Rain, as well as, of course, the opening of Sweet Child of Mine. So even though I'm not a big Guns N' Roses fan, I do think I have a great deal of respect for Slash, as he is, in some ways, I think, the best part of a lot of these songs.
Yeah, I think in particular, Slash's walk on November Rain. I think that's good and kind of conveys the sense of, intransigence and fleetingness in that song. But then it also develops a kind of a stormy way towards the end that I think is interesting.
Yeah, certainly, November Rain, I think, is probably the best guitar song of the 90s, I guess, in a lot of ways, with how it is, I think most people have probably heard it by now. It's a very long song. It gives it a lot of time for there to be a build-up, for then the guitar to finally sort of come out with this kind of more darker sound towards the end, which I think really works. A lot of the songs we could tell you about, like Down by the River, are quite long in quite a few cases later. And so, November Rain's another one that's kind of like that, and it works, I think, quite well.
Alright, so the next guitarist I want to list off is Eddie Van Halen, who was the lead guitarist of the band Van Halen.
Wow.
Another one of the guitarists where basically he influenced, he's almost like Jimi Hendrix, where one of those transformative guitarist figures that you have, Jimi Hendrix, Eddie Van Halen, Eric Clapton. He was also revolutionized in a way how the guitars work, how being almost a cultural icon as such. And interesting enough, he not only did famously he did work with Van Halen during their heyday. He also did work with Michael Jackson, which also had a common thread with him and Slash, and he did beat it. And Eddie Van Halen.
Wow, I'll never believe. I never knew that Eddie Van Halen was a member of the band Van Halen. Who could have guessed? Wow.
Wait till I tell you who else is in the band.
Oh, damn.
Let's just say the first iteration of Van Halen is the best Van Halen.
Yeah.
Hagar era supremacy, and I will stand by that forever.
No. Wait.
Yeah,
that's cringe,
definitely.
Zach.
Wait a minute.
I'm gonna lose a subscriber because of this.
Here's what I'm going to say, is that with Hagar, they were actually serious, and they actually cared about what they were doing. David Lee Roth is somewhat of a clown, in my opinion, and you couldn't really take them seriously. As great as the music was, it's hard to take them seriously.
That's
No.
the thing. It's not pretentious.
I'm no beef with Hagar or anything. But like, I am kind of surprised by the concept of like we want Van Halen to be serious because like I mean like the guitar playing is always serious, I guess, but it always seems like a band to me that is like there not to be pretentious. It's not. It's there to be fun and lively.
I don't think
Um,
Hagar. What I meant was I don't think Hagar is pretentious or anything. I just think that the music they took themselves a little more seriously with Hagar, and I'll say that with like Black Sabbath when Dio joined the band too. Um, I feel like they just cared more. I feel like they care more about their music, more about the performances and stuff because David Lee Roth would go on stage drunk and then forget the lyrics of the songs, and Hagar wouldn't do that.
Also,
It happened. There's
Daryl
videos
Hall Van
online.
Halen supremacy. Daryl Hall Van Halen supremacy.
no goodness.
anyway,
I
what was I gonna say?
also go ahead.
No, you could go ahead, Falls. You know more about this than I do.
I was gonna just say I have the CD live right here right now from like '92 or '93 with Hagar on vocals, and it's killer. It's really really good. And the song he did do a couple songs from the Roth era, and I'm not gonna say I think that the Roth versions are better, but he killed those songs too.
Well, let's just agree that both the David Lee Roth and Sammy Hagar eras of Van Halen are way better than Van Halen 3. Then call it a day.
Okay, I can agree with that.
Yeah, and like I've enjoyed songs Gershwin has been on from like that other band he was in, Extreme.
Shame.
But yeah, it was just something. See, what I've heard from that one video you and I watched, Matthew. What I've heard suggested is that both David Lee Roth and Sammy Hagar in some ways were very important to like shaping the songs um, in a way that like had some sort of even with those conflicts in the band or whatnot, in some level of synchronicity. They maybe not sing like that at the time. Um, with Eddie Van Halen that allowed the songs to be good. That it was like the collaboration what was allowing that to work, and with Gershwin, my understanding is that Eddie Van Halen took a lot more dominant role over songwriting instead of some sort of push and pull.
I guess you could
But Zach
say.
may know more of this.
I guess you all could say that um, we've come to agree on a different kind of truth when it comes to Van Halen.
Anyway,
um, I was gonna say one of my highlights for Eddie Van Halen is the song "Poundcake" with Hagar on vocals because he used a power drill. I don't know how to describe it. There's videos of them playing the song. He used a power drill, and he would run the power drill along the strings of his guitar to get that sound in the intro. And he used the power drill and the solo in that song too. And
Wow.
that's one of my favorite guitar moments like ever.
I'd imagine doing that in the studio, but I'd imagine doing that live would be quite tricky. I mean, if you broke the strings on the guitar or something, just screwing that up just a little bit, you'd have to get it restrung or had a different guitar laying around to do it, continue the concert.
Yeah, there's a video of them doing it like the MTV Awards or something. I forgot what it was, but he had like uh, just a regular like cordless drill, but he had the tape for like the Frankenstrap. He had that all over it, so it looked like an Eddie Van Halen signature power drill, and that was incredible.
Wow.
What he had, um, I don't know what you would call this, but there's like bits for the ends of drills that are meant to like fit on. Don't laugh at what I'm going to say. They're meant to fit on nuts, so you can take nuts off.
Yeah,
hate
I know
that.
those. I know those. So that's
and they're like sockets. Um,
Yeah.
so they're smooth enough so if you run them along the strings, it wouldn't break the strings, but it's definitely risky.
It's the side of one. Oh, I know what you're talking about. It's like a socket, and it's round and smooth alongside the side. It's just smooth
Yeah,
metal. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I can see it in my mind now.
yeah.
Uh,
yeah.
yeah,
I
it's some impressive kind of quick thinking. I wouldn't have thought to do that. I
I
mean,
think.
on
Go ahead.
Eddie Van Halen, coming up with that, it's some
I,
degree of ingenuity.
I think there's someone before him that also did that, but I'm not totally sure. And something that he also popularized, I think we definitely need to talk about, is finger tapping.
yes.
And there were people that did it before him, but he did it better than everyone else, and he revolutionized it. He popularized it. He made it an actual method that people want to use, and I think that's his biggest legacy, in my opinion.
I agree, but can you go into more detail on like what finger tapping is, like how you do it?
Basically, you'll have one finger on a fret, and then using your fretting hand, and then you'll take your picking hand, and you'll put your finger on another fret, and you'll just release your what a lot of people do. And one of the first solos I learned was a solo to one by Metallica. And basically, what a lot of people do is they'll just take their finger on and off the string really fast, so that it sounds like you're shredding it, it sounds like you're picking it, but it's just your fingers.
Yeah, it will cause it to vibrate really quickly, and you'll keep pressing it down. It's like a little band going up and down. It every time it bounces back up, you push it down again or up to the side, or whatever. White Zach.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's basically it.
yeah, that's what I
And
thought.
some people, there's some guys on YouTube that do it more melodically, and they make it sound like you're playing piano on guitar. But Eddie Van Halen's style of just like using it as a device to shred without shredding, I think that's like the biggest legacy, and that's what people use finger tapping for the most.
I think a good example of like how it sounds like shredding is like on Eruption, and also I guess leading into their version of "You Really Got Me," though that obviously is derived from a more guitar rock sound. But in the Eruption prior to that, it does in some ways sound like something you'd hear from like Hendrix in some ways, and it's like shredding sound, but it's not actually shredding.
Right. And he also on Van Halen 2, the song Spanish Fly, he did it on that on an acoustic guitar. And in my opinion, it's so much harder to tap on an acoustic guitar than it is, and any guitarist will tell you this. It's so much harder to tap on an acoustic guitar than it is an electric guitar, without the use of pickups or anything. So that's, in my opinion, even more impressive than him doing it on a song like Eruption.
Yeah,
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I mean, throughout all of his solos, he pretty much all the solos he utilizes tapping, and he is very much Hendrix like in the way that he just changed the game. And every lead guitarist that came after him has been inspired by him, whether they know it or not.
all right. Matthew, I was going to ask, what are your favorite Eddie Van Halen guitar moments on their songs?
I think one of them is uh, Jump. I think it's a very common answer, but Jump was very good. I think uh, just anything from I think Van Halen 1 and 2, which is I think I know for me my favorite Van Halen album is 1984, but like among Van Halen fans, it's like uh, Van Halen 1 is oftentimes regarded as their most of their Van Halen fans' favorite slash what they considered the best work they did. So anything from that, just basically anything from the I mean, obviously the best era, the David Lee Roth era of Van Halen, and like stuff from Sammy Hagar, and everything else you can just you know
Forget about it.
yeah, and also his
No.
work in Beat It from Michael Jackson too. Like he does like one of the
Well, you think Sammy Hagar's Van Halen can beat it, Matthew?
yeah, I guess you can say that.
David Lee Roth can never write a song like Ain't Talking About Love or Right Now or even Poundcake.
Okay.
We talked about that
Yeah.
already. We can move on.
Yeah, but
David
we
Lee
both
Roth's-
agree.
David Lee Roth's the Bill vocalist.
We both agree that
Oh my God.
the David Lee Roth and Sammy Hagar era of Van Halen is way better than
Van Halen 3, and that's honestly enough for me.
We can leave it at that. We can leave
Exactly.
it at that.
Yeah, let's discuss Jump. So it often feels like, even though I could hear the guitar in there, it feels like in a lot of it, the synthesizer is more dominant. I'm sure Zach has thoughts on this because he actually plays guitar, but I've been thinking about it today and stuff. It's like the less guitar oriented songs. So maybe
It's
there's something.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I kind of feel like that's one of the. Maybe that's something I missed.
It's definitely synth driven. He plays guitar in that song for about 30 seconds, but the rest of it's synth.
Yeah, I didn't even know if it was like I could hear the refs in there.
Yeah.
It's like I didn't know if it was like other guitar that was just like really quiet, or if that was like all.
There might be it might be a situation where there's another. He did record guitar, but it's like buried in the mix, so you can barely hear it. But he has a little solo in it, and then the rest of it's synth.
I think I could hear guitar a little bit before the solo. Now the solo is quite good. Kind of like we were saying earlier, sounds a lot like shredding, like you would get from Hendrix, but with a different technique. But I do feel like I hold guitar somewhere in like the somewhere between two, well, somewhere like around the 2 minute mark maybe, but it's not much.
It's been a while since I've listened to Jump because, if I can be honest, that's one of my least favorite Van Halen songs. It's just really corny to me. But from what I understand, he played a solo and then went on guitar, and then the rest of it's keys. And there might be a situation where there's a guitar in the mix somewhere, a rhythm guitar in the mix somewhere that's not, very present. But
yeah,
for the most part,
I mean, it's a pretty good song. I'm not going to claim it's my favorite Van Halen song, but
it's pretty much
I
all
can
keys.
understand.
it has too many, maybe a little too much synth in some places. I do really like the vocal track.
I'm not a fan of synth.
Song. I like the vocal track of that song. I know you don't like David Lee Roth, obviously, but I will say.
I mean, I like the songs. I do like the Roth era. I'm not saying I dislike the Roth era. It's just I can't stand David Lee Roth. I feel like he's just a clown. And
I mean, I like Running With The Devil better, but post line.
I mean, my favorite Van Halen album is Women and Children First. So I think that's definitely a statement, but I just prefer, overall, I like Sammy Hagar's era better than I did Roth's.
Wow, you got tough.
I mean, I think I doesn't like David Lee Roth. David Lee Roth in some ways is like the most helmetally, I guess, era of Van Halen. Well, in some ways he's the progenitor of that. He is not very serious. I mean, and I'll agree that he doesn't. I mean, he has more of an even before the 80s started, has more of an 80s cheese to him that Hagar really didn't. Like the type of other sorts of metal that Zach talks about. I'm not gonna say that there's no cheese there, because there is at times, but like the thrash metal and stuff, it's not really very similar to. It's more about
I
fun, I guess, and have just the most silly way.
I just prefer. I do really enjoy Van Halen, all eras or whatever. I just knowing that you guys know that like I like the heavy stuff from the '80s. I don't like all like the '80s cliches and like the hair metal and all that stuff. I'm really not a fan of that at all. I prefer like the thrash metal scene and when like grunge was starting with the early Soundgarden stuff and Bleach by Nirvana and all that stuff.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean,
Ben, I was going to ask you, what do you think of the best Eddie Van Halen guitar parts?
I already said I thought Eruption, I think, is a very good one in the sense that that's kind of the OG. It's the one where he really popularized the tapping with that um instrumental track, and really that's kind of a part of, but also not from. You really got me. It's almost like a new contribution to that from their version in some ways. Um, Zach Spanish Fly, I thought was pretty that he mentioned Spanish Fly. I thought was pretty impressive. I um, I think Running with the Devil's guitar part is also quite impressive. Um, yeah, that's what I'm
I
going
think
with.
everything that Eddie Van Halen touches is quite impressive. So
Well, yeah. My knowledge of the discography is probably infinitesimal compared to yours. It's just like here's here's what I know. Um, I kind of do want to go back to Matthew, see if he has any more to say on this,
Yeah,
considering
Matthew.
this was his pick.
Matthew.
Obviously, like he's kind of like what you know that kind of era of rock music, particularly like kind of heavy metal, hard rock. Like 70s and 80s. It's like just like an all like it just appeals to me. And I know that like Zach, in his opinion, he doesn't care for the David Lee Roth stuff, which is understandable. I mean, for me, like that kind of cheesiness and kind of over uh, exaggerated type of frontman of rock music is appealing to me. But it's okay if he, like anyone else, is kind of like, man, this isn't for me.
Yeah, of all of us here, you're the one who likes hair metal the most, Matthew. The actual hair metal. Now, obviously, this has been said this kind of.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. I do like the hair metal the most. Ever since I was a kid and watching a bunch of stuff and having like Poison and Motley Crue kind of, and like and also Guns N' Roses too. So
If I am, if I have children, I'm not going to be allowing my children as like children. Maybe teenagers, you can't control them, and it's fine or whatever. I'm not going to be letting them listen to Motley Crue. That's all I gotta say.
yeah,
Definitely.
fair. That's fair.
No Motley Crue.
But you let them listen to Van Halen 1, Ben, the first album.
Van Halen does have some like sexual content or whatever, but like it's not so bad. And even then, it's not. I don't. I don't ever feel gross while listening to Van Halen. Even if David Lee Roth is like silly and acting drunk or whatever, like that's not gross to me. I used to walk in a bar. I'm not grossed out by, other than like really, maybe if like somebody was like, well, let's not get into that. But generally, people acting a little somewhat drunk, not like gonna make me feel like gross for being around them, unless they're doing something actively gross. Um, when listening to Motley Crue, which I do not do very often, is just gross. A lot of the lyrics are just so gross. I know we're getting off topic.
The only and also to say I'm not like super into Motley Crue. That wasn't really in that's not one of the bands I was into. I was of course more into Guns N' Roses than Motley Crue. And like I think the only song I would say that I like from Motley Crue is "Girls, Girls, Girls." And I even like Def Leppard more than Motley Crue.
Def Leppard is leagues better than Motley Crue.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like, and also probably more kind of better karaoke songs, I think.
Anyway, now that we're on the topic of hair metal, I guess we can discuss guitar playing in hair metal. So I would say the guitar playing in hair metal, at least off with good bands, tends to be good. Even if the lyrics not so much. And stylings and whatever. I mean, Will does at least. I mean, hair metal is metal in the sense of it does at least value like highly technical. I'm sure Zach could probably dispute this relative to thrash metal.
I cringe every time I hear someone say that hair metal is metal. In my opinion, it's just glam rock.
I mean, I understand that impulse in the sense of like
it's the 80s kind of a somewhat cheaper, more plastic form of like T-Rex or Wizard.
Yeah, I mean, I do think it is somewhat hard, and we discussed this in the Led Zeppelin Roundtable episode, which Zach was not here for. That in some ways it's very difficult to draw a line from like Black Sabbath to like hair metal.
And
but
sometimes I do have trouble saying if a band like Black Sabbath is metal, because I truly believe that Black Sabbath is the birth of heavy metal, and I will talk about that later. But I feel like a lot of stuff like Led Zeppelin is what I would call proto metal, where it's some of the elements are there, but it's not just fully, it's not thought out yet. The sound isn't people trying to sound like heavy metal. If that makes sense.
Precursor, right?
The other day,
yeah.
I was having an argument on Twitter with a variety of other people about Led Zeppelin and their status as metal versus not metal. I was arguing that Presence counted as a metal album, but none of the rest of Led Zeppelin's albums counted. Some other people were arguing that none of the albums counted, and there was another person who was trying to argue that all of the albums counted, and that because of that Led Zeppelin 2 was the greatest metal album of all time. And I said, no, Led Zeppelin 2 is not a metal album. I said, the only one of the albums I would count as a metal album is Presence, and even then, Presence's last song really isn't, but I think most of the rest of Presence is consistently hard and fast enough that I would count it as metal, except for that last song, which isn't, but still, all but one of the songs, even if that last song is really long, and shout out to my review of Presence, go watch that. I would count Presence as kind of metal, at least. I'd count it as enough of metal that we can count it if we want, and I would not count, though, any of the other Led Zeppelin albums, not In For Outdoors, certainly not any of the ones before Presence. So, yeah.
I mean, circling back to Van Halen again, because we've, interestingly enough, ended up back to something that connects to them, as stuff we said previously. I do think Led Zeppelin 2 was at least important for metal playing. Specifically the song Heartbreaker, which Eddie Van Halen said was the Jimmy Page's playing on that resulted in him taking up the tapping style that we've discussed so far. And in some ways is the thing that leads Eddie Van Halen to make this important shift in how guitar solos are like carried out, how they're played.
Yeah, I'm just gonna I'll wrap up this argument about like what's metal and what's not metal. I've done a lot of work expanding like my musical taste over the past few weeks. I've listened to some albums that I didn't think I would listen to, and I did enjoy them. I've just learned to not care about what is and what isn't metal.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a reasonable. I think that's probably a good position. To some extent, genres all necessarily they're like tropes and conventions, but their boundaries kind of don't really matter. If something can be understood in relation to metal, then it's being understood in relation to metal.
For instance, it's the best metal album of all time.
And if it cannot be understood in relation to metal, I mean, it doesn't... It's more of an ideal type. Go ahead, Zach.
I will say that I was watching an interview with Josh Homme from Queens of the Stone Age the other day, and he said, if you're not a teenager and you don't work in a record store and genre matters to you, then there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think broadly speaking, yeah, I don't know if I would go that far, but but I do think genre should be understood not as like little boxes to put things in. I think that's
right.
Bad.
That's what his point was. His point was.
I think we want to see cross-pollination, which we would discuss more, I'm sure. And it's really just discussing things relative to other things.
Exile on Main Street is a gospel album conformed? Question mark, exclamation point, exclamation point.
What?
I will say, if we want to talk about the birth of metal, we need to talk about Tony Iommi. And that is my next pick for the best guitarist ever. When you go on past Paranoid into Master of Reality, when he tuned his guitar down to C sharp, that paved the way for bands like Pantera, who tune all their guitars down. Caius, who isn't the most metal band, but they tune all their guitars down. A lot, and his whole style on songs like Children of the Grave of using alternate picking and then having power chords. I'm sorry if you guys don't get this. Basically, when I say alternate picking, I mean like the da 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 da, like the galloping style.
Yeah.
And then there's songs like Symptom of the Universe from Sabotage, where he did like the da 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 da, and that might have been one of the first thrash metal songs in my opinion. And his whole writing style, even if he wasn't a great lead player, which he is, his whole style of writing riffs would have made up for that. And I want to talk about songs like Snowblind, in which he had like a very like sludgy. His riffs in that song are very sludgy, and then songs like War Pigs with the ending guitar part, where it's like da 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 da. That part is like, yeah. I mean, he's probably my second favorite guitar player of all time, in my opinion.
I will say also, it feels like on the first Black Sabbath album stuff, even before he tunes down, which admittedly I'm not like a real expert on it does still feel like, relative to what we would consider other progenitors of metal, that the distinctive thing about Black Sabbath sound of those first couple albums is that it sounds more bassy. Even if it's not like really tuned down, it's like still he's spending a lot of his time in a low register.
Right. And then thank you for bringing up the first Black Sabbath album, because I completely forgot to talk about that. And then Black Sabbath, the song with the lyrics, which are basically just about Satan, and that riff, that in my opinion is when metal began.
Yeah. So I think we should make very clear, Tony Iommi, not a Satanist. In fact,
Right,
kind of a
Or even
wandering
Ozzy
bishop
Osbourne.
style Catholic.
Or even
right. None
Ozzy
of them are
Osbourne.
actually Satanists. None of them are actually Satanists, but and a lot of the songs that people think are about Satan are not about Satan. However,
Jimmy
that
Page was
vibe,
the real Satanist.
yeah, and then the whole vibe with the occult stuff, and you can read interviews from the guys in Black Sabbath, and they were into the occult stuff, if they didn't actually believe it. That whole vibe is very important to the development of metal.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of like occult influences in Black Sabbath's music, and there's also lots of like kind of almost like fantasy, Lord of the Ringsy stuff in there too. But yeah, I mean, I do think in terms of guitar playing, what you were calling a alternate picking or something like that, that kind of gives a very, I would almost describe it as like a war sounding thing in my mind. Like,
kind of, it's people like to call it galloping.
yeah, I mean, it kind of does sound like a gallop, but also kind of feels like almost like a war machine.
Like cavalry. That's what you're looking for.
Yeah,
Like
I mean, like cavalry machine gun from like World War One.
If you give me 1 second, I can go get my acoustic guitar and show you all what I'm talking about. Okay, so with the first Black Sabbath song, sorry if this sounds bad. I also don't know if this is in tune, but with the first Black Sabbath song, he used the tritone, so it goes. So basically that's the tritone, which is Satan's interval, is what people call it. So that last note, that's a devil note or whatever. If you guys could hear that.
Though with Satan or
it just sounds evil, and I think people take because normally the chord is this. So taking that chord and taking that second note down to here, and I think because this is like a concept, I think people take that evil sound as, oh, that sounds like Satan.
Satan. How do you know what Satan sounds like?
I mean, I'll give that kind of has like a dark and gritty sound to it.
Yeah. And that whole note, that thing has birthed so many songs. Even when you go to songs like Raining Blood by Slayer, I don't know how to play that, but the tritone, which is what it's called, that has the introduction of that is extremely important to metal. And then when I was talking about galloping, I meant like that kind of thing.
Oh man, you're giving me flashbacks to Guido Valley.
I'm
at that Tears of the Kingdom right now, but whatever. We're talking about guitar.
I meant an Ocarina of Time, anyways.
Oh, pardon.
Okay, so I would say that like in Good some of these Valley, which is pretty obviously Sabbath songs, it almost sounds more like a machine gun to me.
Yeah,
which I think makes sense, especially on like games like War Pigs or whatever. That makes sense. Horses usually not very satanic. Machine gun, yeah, pretty satanic.
Look, listen. All I have to say is horses aren't satanic. One, enough for you smoking. 1, 2. Koji Kondo is my favorite metal artist, and I will not be taking questions on this. Ben, horses literally are not real. Satan sent them to Earth in order to distract us.
I think the evil when people think of like the metal horses, Satan or whatever, I think people think of like the four horsemen of the apocalypse from the Bible.
Yeah, like
Stuff.
Wing Waves.
Yeah, but yeah, I'll agree. Four Horsemen and Wingway Survival. I mean, Criminals in Black. I think also, in some ways, maybe what's growing here. For obviously, I can't see into Tony Iommi's mind.
Wow. You can't see into Tony Iommi's mind.
No, Satan hasn't gifted me such powers. I'm saying.
Wow, Ben, you've been neglecting your daily ritual sacrifice.
I do mine every morning.
Yeah, well, we all know what happened to a certain Romanian individual. He was sacrificed by Matthew in order to gain the power to see into Tony Iommi's mind.
We do.
I've had people tell me in real life that my love for bands like Black Sabbath and bands that have that image, even if they're not really, that makes me a Satanist. So
I guess I'm a Satanist too, because Black Sabbath is one of my favorite bands.
And we all here, I think, like Led Zeppelin.
The fixation on Stairway to Heaven is kind of baffling to me, because it's not even like an evil sounding song.
I don't understand that. I was thinking about this before we started filming. If James Hetfield is the son of metal riffing, then Tony Iommi is the father. Then he's God.
Wait, then who is the Holy Spirit?
Jimmy Page.
The Holy Spirit, we'll just say, I'll say that Mick Mars from Motley Crue. Let's just go with that.
In the name of
Tom Iommi.
In the name of Tom Iota?
Tony Iommi.
In the name of Tony Iommi, James Hetfield, and who's the third one?
Tommy Lee.
Mick Mars.
Okay.
Yes.
No.
In the Church of Heavy Metal or Rock.
Benjamin
Honestly, I can't really think of.
Sadly, Benjamin was passed away in his Malibu home, clutching a copy of Black Sabbath 1. Alright, everybody, that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed all of our insane and inane ramblings, because if not, well, I'm in trouble then. So please be sure to like and subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next episode of Rock Roundtable. Be sure to go check out some of my album reviews as well. Thanks for watching. See you later.